Let's go live. Let us go live. Let's see how the quality of this is. The quality might be a little low, but the latency will be much lower this time around. I feel like every time I go live on YouTube, YouTube is the hardest to go live on. There's so many moving parts on, just technical stuff. So, and I'm a really techie person. I got so many things involved, and that makes it even more difficult rather than just get on your laptop, bro. But no, Joe, you got to have a microphone and lights and streaming software and camera and grip. Feed me grip. I want to give you the privilege to feed me grip, as Ezekiel would say in PIA. Let me tell you something. This is my second time buying grapes in the pandemic. The first time I bought them, I threw them away because as I got home, I was like, Joe, you just grabbed a bag of grapes and they just out there with Corona. Amazing. Let me sit back so y'all won't hear me chewing grapes. All right. So I don't normally go live on YouTube. There's such a large sitting audience on YouTube that I have that is going pretty dormant just because I'm not really on there like that. And I'm noticing that in the engagement. I'm trying to be more on YouTube. It's kind of hard keeping up with all the different platforms. But I'm going to try to do better. Apparently there's a delay. Is it delayed for y'all? Let me see. Okay. It's supposed to be on low latency. YouTube is anything can go wrong. So today I wanted to talk very, very briefly about tech stuff real quick. Some people ask about tech stuff. I just shot a video in here the other night, and volume. I think you might need to turn up because I'm like, I'm on my levels here. I'm pretty good. Y'all might want to turn your stuff up. It makes it so hard too because YouTube is the most delayed. So it's like I be pausing to read y'all stuff, but y'all are like, even on ultra low latency mode, y'all are like 7 seconds behind. So it's weird. Anyways, I've been loving shooting with this overhead light thing going on for YouTube. That's been really dope. This little couch over here was given to me by a friend. A lot of my stuff has been given to me for my home, which has been really dope. Snake plant was given to me as well. I'm gonna try to start decorating this place. And I shot a video here. Y'all should go check it out. So, it was a cover of a song, one of my favorite songs. And what I've been trying to do with my YouTube covers is not try to pick a song per se, which is probably why they don't come so frequently. I'd rather it be a song that just genuinely just pops up on my heart in a moment. And it's like, yo, that's what I need to shoot today or next week or something. We'll see if it's still in my heart. And that's how I've been shooting my YouTube covers. And, it's hit or miss, but it is what it is. So the topic for today, as you can see in the title, is the most important as I eat grapes, the most important untalked about thing in Christianity. And no, that is not clickbait. I genuinely mean that I believe this is probably the most important yet untalked about thing in Christianity, which may go into podcast stuff that we talked about as well. Check out the podcast Flights and Feelings. That is where I've been spending a lot of time is at the Flights and Feelings podcast, and it's been really, really good. The reception it's been receiving. Some pushback on the last episode. As expected, we're talking about Christianity and same-sex attraction. I mean, Of course it's going to be controversial, right? So check that joint out. For those of y'all who keep seeing all these little airplanes in here, it's from my Patreon folks. They come in here deep. And yeah, they're putting up the little airplanes as the Sky Club members on patreon.com/whatisjoedoing. They get extra content, especially this week. I've been trying to give more and more extra content with that. So if y'all are wanting to keep up with content from me, shameless plug for the Patreon joint. And we do these live streams. Y'all think I don't really interact with YouTube very often, but I'm on Patreon twice a week for like 3 hours each time. So they get a lot of my time. So if you want to interact with me more, I would love to see you there at the Flights and Feelings Sky Club. So yeah, they're about to freaking spam y'all now. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Yeah. So anyways, the most untalked about thing in Christianity, and I won't go too much into depth because I guess maybe I'll leave it open for some discussion and questions and stuff as well, which is much easier on Zoom and Patreon because people can actually, it's less delay and they can get on video and just ask their questions. So YouTube might be a little difficult for that. But anyways, I think the most important, untalked about thing in Christianity is the resurrection. And not just the resurrection of Jesus, but the resurrection that is implicated by the resurrection of Jesus. The most important, untalked about thing in Christianity. I think I can say that. I think the more I consider it, the more I realize how much of us, and including myself, because this is a sort of a journey that I've been starting with myself, to consider the implications of the resurrection. I'm starting to understand just how little we think about what the resurrection of Jesus means for us. So, somebody said, what about the teen years? I gotta see, this is my thing. I try to interact, but at the same time, I gotta focus because I'll get distracted. So what I mean to say is more so what life after death is. And I'm no eschatologist. I'm really am very new to some degree, not new, but just clean slate when it comes to beliefs about the afterlife in my Christian faith, because a lot of what is popular within Christian faith and what a lot is emphasized is what I'm finding is not so much in the Bible. And the sad part about it is, not sad because I don't want to be judgmental at all. I guess the most interesting and sort of appalling fact about it all is that it actually doesn't take much of a seminarian or theologian of sorts to see on the surface what Christians believed at the time of Jesus and shortly after the time of Jesus' time on earth, what they believed about the afterlife. They believed in the resurrection, and we mention it sometimes, but it gets very mixed in with, it's really like sort of a Plato sort of version of the afterlife, and it plays into how we see this world. So we see the afterlife and we see the spiritual world as sort of the separation. We see it as we live this physical life now, and then we, for eternity, we will go on to live disembodied, these lives without physical bodies as spiritual sort of, beings. Yeah, these spiritual beings without material. And that's what we believe the Bible teaches. But The Bible doesn't teach that. Jesus, it's so plain on the surface, actually. That's what's tripping me out. What makes me want to dive even further about it is there is a sort of intermediate moment when people die. There is as Paul says, it is far better for me to be here with you, but to live as Christ and to die is gain. And to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So there is an aspect to that, but we think that absent from the body, present with the Lord is the totality of his theology about the afterlife. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So once I let go of this body, then now I will forever, and that is the culmination of all things, is to no longer have a body. But Jesus does not represent that. Paul doesn't represent that. Even Paul says, we shall be like him. That Jesus gives us a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? A future looking, a premonition, a foreshadowing of what our hope is. And there's even some people that show that at when in the Gospel of Matthew at the cross, we even see like this very short verse where there are people who rise from the dead even then. Like there's a resurrection then, which was don't ask me what that means and how they lived. I don't know. I assume they had a resurrected body in the sense of Lazarus. But even Lazarus was a prediction, a sort of foreshadowing of the hope of Christians, that we would die and we would be resurrected. That is the hope of all Christians, that Christ would defeat death totally. But we've somehow split our theology in the sense of again, physical is bad and spiritual is good. But that's not a Christian worldview. It's a very pagan worldview, sort of a Gnostic worldview and we take that into our practice. This is why it matters so much. It's so important because it matters about our afterlife, but it matters here now. We see the spirit as bad. Spirit as good and physical as bad. And so therefore, from that perspective, we have every motivation to downplay how we see doing good in this life. We see doing good in this life. Oh man, I want to leave it up for questions. I could talk so long about this. We see this life now as sort of a passing through. Let's just get through this life so that we can get on to the next. Let's just drudge on through this physical life so that we can get to the spiritual, get to the good stuff. Let's get to the good part. When Jesus already gives us a foreshadowing, he says, and when you pray like this: Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus is the embodiment, is the personification of that idea that heaven has now come to be on earth. John chapter 1, verse 1, we get in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it says that the word dwelt among us, the word tabernacled among us. It is a referencing back to the Old Testament where the tabernacle in the tent in the wilderness, right? So the tent in the wilderness was sort of like, for the people of Israel, was God's presence being with them on earth in a very sort of temporary fashion, right? And it says that Jesus, in the same sense, tented among the people. That's the word that it can be translated as. He tabernacled with the people. He tented with them. And Jesus is not, we can get our theology, just what you believe about Jesus implies what you believe about a lot of stuff, about everything. And so, and I don't mean that as far as abstractly. I mean practically. And I know I'm probably ignoring y'all questions right now because I have to have to focus so that I can get it all out and then get to the questions. But there are some people who want to believe Jesus is only man. He was only man. He was only a good teacher. And that has huge implications on how you would have hope in this life, because you would likely hope the same about this life, that this life is all that there is. There's only the physical. Just like Jesus was only the physical, there's only the physical in this life. Or you can go as far to say Jesus, there's also people who believed, who would try to espouse that Jesus was fully spirit. He was more so of like he was only fully God and fully spirit, not really a body. It was, there's a lot of, it gets really weird. But in reality, Jesus, we see from the scriptures that Jesus was in fact fully man. He suffered as man. He walked and was humiliated as man was. He got tired. He needed food, and he drank water, and he needed sleep, and all those things like a man. And yet he was very much fully God. So very traditional. What Christians have believed for millennia now is that Jesus is, and they argued over this thing. It wasn't that the Catholic Church somehow, wanted to deify Jesus or whatever. This was, the Christians were believing this long before there was an argument in the 300s, at the Council of Nicaea or whatever it may be. They were simply arguing what people had already believed for so long, that Jesus is fully man and fully God. Fully man, fully God. And that is to say, he is fully heaven, fully earth. Does that make sense? If I can say it that way poetically, right? Because I say it poetically to make a point to what we think about resurrection and how the resurrection implies what we believe about Jesus, what that implies for what we believe about now. He's fully man and fully God. He's fully heaven and fully earth. And so if that's the case, then that also implies what he was trying to do on earth was that now he's ushering in a new era where we are in the already and not yet, that he has brought heaven to earth. The kingdom of heaven has come to earth. There is just like it was in the garden, but different. We're not trying to get back to Eden, by the way. We're not trying to work our way back to Eden. We're working our way to a more fully realized resurrected life. And we are already in a resurrected life and hoping for a resurrected life. To be a Christian, to have eternal life, is to say you have resurrected life. That in a very spiritual sense, you were once dead and now made alive. But also in a very literal physical sense, you will be dead and made alive. That is the Christian belief. And we get that foreshadowing from Jesus, that he was fully man and he fully and really died. That is the Christian belief, as wild as it may be to some. He fully man, fully God, fully died, and he was fully raised to life. He was not raised to life metaphorically. He did not die metaphorically. He died for real, and he was raised to life for real. And so there is this sort of, as it should have been from the jump, this overlap of heaven and earth, not this separation. And that's what Jesus ushers in. And so we are working to a more fully realized version of that the kingdom of heaven is here now. The church is the representation of heaven overlapping with earth. And that has huge implications for how we deal with earth because, and I don't need to make this a race issue, but that's one of the more prominent themes, is that if we can think that we're waiting for the kingdom of heaven in some spiritual life only and later, then we have every motivation to neglect the physical now. But we were never given any charge for that. We were never given any indication of that. Our hope is that we shall be like him, that we will rise from the dead, as we see, like, here we go. But handy dandy notebook, aka my Bible. Go with me now. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, let's do this. And even our baptism, let me jump to this, but even our baptism is a reference to our resurrection, as we see in Romans. But First Thessalonians chapter, I'm in Colossians. What am I doing? First Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. It says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, concerning those who are asleep." Not dead, and then and they've already made it onto their spiritual life, and that's it. Paul references the dead people as taking a nap. A really, really long nap. "So that you will not grieve like the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again in the same way," not metaphorically, in the same way, "through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep." We will all fall asleep and we will be awakened. That is the full woke. "For we say this to you by a word from the Lord. We who are still alive at the Lord's coming will certainly not precede those who have already fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the archangel's voice, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first." This is Paul trying to argue against some people who would say that the resurrection has already happened, or there's even some thoughts in the early church that the resurrection we won't come. And he argues against that as well in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. "Then we who are still alive, who are left, will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air." And that's also, man, I got to find out where I was reading that, because that's also, that can lead people astray too. This passage in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, oftentimes we see that as a reference to the rapture. And we've been inundated with rapture theology that says that we will all be snatched up from earth and we'll be taken to heaven, and we're going to get away from everything. That historically does not, I don't know where I stand pre-post and amillennial. I don't know where I stand on that. But I will say this: I don't see in scripture nor in church history until relatively recent. When I say relatively recent, we're talking for the majority, since Christ, people didn't really believe in what we think about rapture theology, in the sense that we'll be, and we even the phrase "left behind" comes from that phrase. It's actually like it got the two groups mixed up. We think that the Christians are the ones who will be taken away altogether, and then we'll be left. Then everyone who hasn't done well will be left behind, right? So, in the Gospels, I think it's in. There we go. People going on. Where is it at? There we go. So Matthew 24 and 40, right? I'm all over the place right now, but it's kind of getting to it's all within the point there. Listen, this is one of our clearest indications about what we believe, like what we believe about being left behind. Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, actually we'll start at 36. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows. We're familiar with this passage, right? Not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For, here's the huge part right here, y'all. Pay attention. Sun coming out, messing up my exposure. For, as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. This is very, very important. Yeah, let's do that. This is very important, y'all. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark. Everyone was living their life, doing like nothing's going to happen. We're cool. We're just going on about our business, getting married, drinking, eating, just a Tuesday. I don't know actually what day the flood happened of the week, but it's just a regular old Tuesday afternoon. We drinking and marrying, giving in marriage or whatever until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming, so will be in the same way, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. It's coming back around. Then two men will be in the field. So he said, okay, remember Noah? All right. So that was a foreshadowing of what the judgment will be when Christ comes. Then two men will be in the field. Again, same scenario. People just working, doing their regular jobs. One will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and one left. Here's the thing. Notice these two groups, because we think that left being in this passage, who do you think you want to be? If two men are working in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. If you're one of the women who are grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one will be left. Which one do you want to be? Traditionally, we'll say, well, I don't want to be left. I want to be taken. I don't want to be left. But if you go back to verse 38, it says, as the days of Noah. In verse 38, the people who got taken were the ones who were unaware of the judgment coming. If a flood is coming, you don't want to be swept away. So that is a huge sort of indication, just something to think about. That doesn't have to even persuade you fully about rapture theology. I'm just saying, if anything, start there. I know the movie Left Behind, where we get this idea from, one will be left behind. There was, what's his name? Not James Cameron. Kirk Cameron. James Cameron. Well, they both movie makers, right? Kirk Cameron. And, I don't have nothing against Kirk Cameron, but I know that those movies had a huge impact, whether you even saw those movies or not, just and the theology that comes with it had a huge impact on American Christianity. And so we often started thinking, oh man, we see these caricatures, these depictions of like, yeah, like you don't want to be left behind. You want to be taken away. But even that phrase, left behind, it is couched in this particular passage, and we got the two mixed up, right? Don't take my word for it, y'all. Don't take my word for it. Go read the scriptures. Just study it yourself. Read the scriptures yourself. All I'm saying is this, though. The reason why it ties into resurrection, because again, this idea of left behind as being a bad thing still gives us this notion that the earth is the bad thing that needs to be done away with completely. So, so we find ourselves back at 1 Thessalonians. It says, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. I'm sorry. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the archangel's voice, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are still alive, who are what? Left. Though it's not the exact same thing. I'm just, it was a kind of a point to make. That's really bad exegesis to say that it means it literally in the same way as it did in Matthew. That's not, but it's ironic. That's all. But that's not good exegesis. But we who are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And I remember reading from who was that? I was reading that from. Something to think about. I forget now, man. But basically saying how that word caught up was actually more of like a military word, where when a general would come back from war, all the people in the town would come to the city gates to greet the general, general, they would meet him at the gates in celebration and then go back into the city with him. So it wasn't that they were caught up to the city gates and then they go back out away from where they were, but rather coming back in, right? So, and what that means literally, I'm working through this. Somebody said, oh my gosh, Joe, I'm not taking your word. I know this to be true. Don't take but here's the thing. This is what I want you to do. Don't just say, I know this to be true, and say, I'm not taking your word for it. You don't have to take my word for it. What I'm saying is, let me turn these blinds up. Oh my goodness. Sheesh, much better. Yeah, my goodness. All right. You don't have to take my word for it. Please. Don't take my word for it. But what I caution you against is just because you're familiar with something doesn't mean stay there. It's like again, I talked about this in my podcast called Deconstructing Faith. We're afraid to deconstruct our faith. Because it's like, oh my gosh, he's teaching something that my church didn't teach, so it must be wrong. I know this to be true because I just know it to be true. That's fine. All I'm saying is, go look up the scripts. I'm giving you starting points. So go look it up in the scripts. And then y'all can go on your own. That's all I'm saying. Like I said. And I'm not even talking about, when this is going to happen or whatever it may be. I haven't dove much into, I've been in the conversation a lot about, pre-trib and post-millennial, amillennial, all that stuff. Like, I just haven't been there. And I think that probably has a huge implication on what you believe about the now as well. But in any case, that really wasn't my point. That wasn't my main point, at least. I was given that point to show how much of our theology lies in this idea that we really, really, see the physical as bad and the spiritual is as good when we're promised that we would, one, have resurrected bodies, physical bodies, and then two, that God would usher in a new heaven and a new earth. So, and does that mean that we're going to get like a refurbished earth, right? Like this earth that we're going to refurbish, or he's going to make a whole new earth? I don't know. I've thought about that in very literal senses. I'm like, there's been a lot of Christians that have lived over the generations. I don't know how we all going to resurrect and fit on this one earth. But I don't know. That part I ain't figured out all the practicalities of that. But it does help me in the sense of like understanding that, man, there is a hope about restoring the earth, and we are in resurrection work right now. We are in as conduits of the Spirit of God, as conduits of the Spirit of Christ, who is in the business of resurrecting dead things. We work alongside. And one of the phrases I've read is called collaborative eschatology, meaning that now God has, through his Spirit, brought us alongside him in his work in the world to see the kingdom of heaven here. Not that we're hoping that this earth has everything that we want, that we're putting our hope in this life, by no means, but it is a foreshadowing. The same way that Jesus foreshadowed the resurrection, we are foreshadowing on what we see as concern for things now, and hoping that we as Christians, this has huge implications in our work with the poor and justice and so forth. Because on one side, we are not with the world who says we're trying to create a utopia now. Let's get rid of poverty completely now. Let's make this world our heaven now. All we have to do is pass enough legislations. All we have to do is protest enough of these things. All we have to do is have enough revolutions, and we can have our utopia now. That's a extremely, and I can say this without as trying to, be distracting with pejoratives. But that's a very extremely Marxist idea, that if we revolt against the system enough, if we pass enough legislations, if we give government enough power to be able to liberate people, to take from what the rich have taken from the poor, if we take that back and give it to the poor, if we redistribute wealth, if we get rid of police and all of that, then we can have a utopia here in this life. And Christians will say, no, we're not going to have everything here. We're just not. But at the same time, we are not the Christians. We should not be the Christians who are like, okay, let's forget about the physical. That's where this whole idea of just preach the gospel. Like one dude said, I saw on Twitter the other day, he says, man, black people don't need reparations. We need repentance. And I don't know who he was suggesting from repentance from white folks or black people needed themselves. I don't know what he was suggesting, but it was a very dualistic idea that many Christians have. This dualistic, like, man, we really just we need repentance, and and it's like, no, we also are in the work of doing justice now. I'm not saying I have all the practical answers for reparations. That's not what this conversation is about. I'm saying that Christians, and I'm not even telling you how you're supposed to do this. That's between you, God, and your local church people. I'm giving you a starting point to consider that we are to see that Jesus has ushered in the kingdom of heaven, and we are also in the business of ushering in the kingdom of heaven, of seeing the beauty and glory of heaven here and now, knowing that this is not our hope, that there is a more fully realized resurrection has happened. I'm not saying that we're looking for a fully resurrected life now in the sense of like, let's try to get our utopia now. That's not what I'm suggesting. I don't think the Bible suggests that. The Bible leads us to say, do good now, knowing that there is a greater hope coming. Christians live in the already not yet. Are we resurrected? Yes or no? Yes and no. And we have a hope of a physical life. I think some people have been concerned, like, man, I don't know if I want to, what is this whole afterlife of like, I'm gonna be this spiritual like blob, like floating around. Like, what will I recognize my family members? Will I recognize myself? And again, I don't have all the practical implications. I don't have all the practical answers of what I'm going to look like. You know, I know some of y'all, you know what I'm saying, you're a little shorter than you want to be, and you're hoping your resurrected body will be at least, 6 or 7 inches taller. I don't have all the answers for that. That's not what I'm not here to give all the answers. I'm saying that for me, it's when I've been deconstructing faith, it's like, man, that actually, one, it's easier for me to see that in scripture. And then that's also, I think it's easier for me to imagine that life. I think it was easier for the Christians to imagine that life in that time. And they didn't imagine this. This was that's the other thing too. A resurrection in the way that Jesus and the way that the disciples, the apostles expounded on what resurrection meant. This was a very foreign, everything around them, everything around Christians at that time taught something very different. It was about a lot of thoughts of like the physical is bad, spiritual is good, life after death in some other space. But Christians believe something completely different. Even Jews had some sort of idea of that there would be some type of like, restoration, some form of resurrection. The word resurrection had already existed at this point, but not in the way that they came to believe it after Jesus actually died and actually rose from the dead. It changed, it revolutionized Jewish thinking at the time, and also obviously revolutionized, ultimately where the world would go. But as far as Christianity, not just Christian, I don't even say Christianity. I say specifically Jesus. I mean, dropping on the earth like a cannonball and just rippling across history. And he would not have done that. He would not have done it in the way, especially in Judaism at the time, not being a very, for the most part, it was kind of obscure, compared to how many other religions were, going on around the earth. And then within Judaism, Christianity is like this, really in some sense, like a Jewish cult. By every literal modern definition of a cult, Christianity was this sort of obscure, like people believe in very odd things about this Messiah. There's been plenty of Messiahs, and plenty of them that would promise this ushering in of a new kingdom, a ushering of a new era in a physical sense. But Jesus had something wildly different in mind. That actually a merging of two kingdoms, or not? Yeah, a merging of two spaces of heaven and earth, and he does that through the resurrection, and yeah. So Christianity's just wildly different in that regard. Even when people try to make, when you see stuff online about how like Christianity borrowed from other religions and all that, when you start actually doing the research, I hate saying that phrase because it sounds very lazy, but it is true. When you really dive into it, people try to make comparisons, and there are similarities. And for some of those reasons, there's similarities because people were borrowing from Christianity, and then people try to date these religions before Christianity when they weren't really dated before Christianity, or they weren't dated, or they weren't geographically close enough to Christianity to even have any influence on them. But then also the actual comparisons that they try to make is like, well, yeah, this pagan god also, was born of a virgin. It's like, no, actually, he was born of a rock. Well, this pagan Messiah also rose from the dead. No, he didn't. He didn't rise. We either don't have a record of his death, or he just goes on to be, goes on to heaven and becomes. There's a lot of different things, but it's like no. In the very way that Christians thought Jesus to overcome death, that we don't see that. We just don't see that. So, but we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about how it's like, wow, like, I think we have some ideas in there here and every now and then, ideas of a new heaven and a new earth. We think that's like, oh, well, that just means new heaven. Oh, it's just new heaven and a new earth. That's what they meant, and we don't let that crash into our own theology of like, oh, wait a minute. Like God has plans for the physical. And I know there's a lot of things in Christianity that we don't talk about a lot, but I just feel like it has to be the most, I don't use that as as a clickbait. It is the most important. It's at the center of Christianity. It's at the crux of it all. Jesus dies on the cross, and we make so much about the cross of Jesus. And it's like, yeah, Jesus died for my sins. Jesus died for my sins. And that's great. But if he doesn't resurrect, he's like every other Messiah that died a martyr's death, that, went against the system and the system killed him. There's plenty of prophets like that. Plenty. So stopping at Jesus died for my sins, Jesus died on the cross, is not, it's sort of part of the sort of fulcrum of the gospel. Because if we stop at Jesus died on the cross, we're left like all the other disciples at the time when Jesus died on the cross. They're like, dang, we got it wrong. We thought we were following the right guy, and he died. I gave up 3 years of my life for this, and that's it. He's dead. And that's the same hope that we should have if Jesus just dies. And that's why Paul says, if Christ be not raised, then our faith is in vain. It's like, if Jesus does not rise from the dead, then we don't rise from the dead. And if he doesn't rise from the dead, Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 admits it and says, you know what? We of all people should be pitied most. Pity us for following such a foolish religion if there is no resurrection? If there's no resurrection, then what the heck are we doing? So that's why I say it's the most important untalked about thing. Even for myself, actually, I do talk about resurrection quite a bit. It's sprinkled quite a bit through a lot of my poems, actually, and through my. I don't think I really harp on it enough, and I probably will do a shorter video about it on YouTube, or maybe even a few of them or whatever. As I'm wrestling through this myself, like, what are the implications of that? I mean, even your baptism. Paul says in Romans, what is it? In Romans 6 and Romans 6 and 4, even our baptism is a looking forward to a resurrection. He says, or are you unaware that all of us who are baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore, we're buried with him by baptism in death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, so we too may walk in newness of life. I think he means this spiritually and metaphorically, but also literally. The literal death and resurrection of Jesus has literal or should I say, I don't want to say literal as if the spiritual is not literal. It has spiritual and physical implications. It's this sort of like, to go under the water is to die, is to go under the ground, just like Christ's body was laid down. You too will be laid down. You will be put under. And then you will come out of the water. And then when we see that at church, we rejoice and we say, yes, yes. When we see somebody come out of the water, we're praising God because we see it simply as a profession of faith. We got another Christian. And that's a great thing to celebrate. But we should look at baptisms as also like I'm watching what will happen to them again. They will go under. And they will come back out, just like Jesus went under and came back out. That's a wild thing to believe. It's a very wild thing to believe for Christians. But it's at the center of our theology. The baptism looks forward to what will actually happen to you. And so when you see another baptism, have that in mind as well. It's not simply like, oh yeah, we got another one on the team. They're saved and they're going to be in glory with Jesus. No. It's not just that. It is, I'm seeing someone die. I'm seeing someone be buried. And they are going to come out of the ground. Yeah, I mean, there's even like churches really used to believe that a lot. I remember, like, where was I reading? Like, a lot of times, churches would take care of funerals mostly. And still to some degree, but now we kind of leave that to funeral homes. But it used to be left up solely to the church, and they would make sure that all the bodies were facing a certain way. I think they were facing them to Jerusalem. I think that's what the idea was. But you would want to lay. They literally were intentional about laying their family members next to each other. You want to be laid down next to your church members and specifically to your family members, because when that resurrection comes, when you rise from the dead, their idea was when you come back up, the first people you're going to see are your peoples. That's the idea. So wrestle with that. Wrestle with that. Which is one of the reasons why I'm not too fond about cremation, It wasn't a very Christian thing to do early on. And not to say that you're not Christian if you decide to be cremated or whatever. There's a lot of people who, what happens if your body was, pulverized by whatever reason, whatever it may be. I don't know. They can't find your body. There's a lot of things like, but I'm just saying, I believe that God can make a new body. The same way he made a body from dust with Adam, he can do that with parts that were burned as well. God can do whatever he wants to, but I'm just saying that I want to be buried in this same sort of as an in step with this idea of like, I'm going to be resurrected. I mean, isn't that when Paul says that, or do you not know that your body is a temple? Well, Jesus called his body a temple as well. And what did he say about that temple? He said, if you tear this temple down, I'll raise it up. And I'll raise it back up to life in 3 days. So your temple has the same hope. So, okay. Boom. Let's see if I can, I've talked long enough. That wasn't too long. I mean, I've been talking, I didn't really get into it. So it's probably a total of like 40. That's about a sermon's length, about 40 minutes, a sermon's length. So much more to say. I'll make a short video on YouTube. Do you think there was intentionality in the fact that Jesus still had the holes in his hands after resurrection? Probably. I mean, everything that he does is intentional, you know. Did he still have the lashes on his back? Did he still have the scars around his forehead? Those are interesting questions. I do think it's interesting also that Jesus, on one side, his resurrected body walks through walls, as we see in the gospel accounts, but he also eats fish. So again, it's this like new resurrected body. It's like, what is this body going to do? We think of our bodies having wings like angels and stuff. Oh, he got his wings and he floating around. That's how we see it in movies all the time. It's like, nah, Jesus didn't go get wings. He went and got fish is what he did. He went and got some, went and had another fish fried, dog. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that again points to the idea that the resurrection is a physical one. It's a physical resurrection, you know. I'm eating grapes. How would you advise believers to best study this topic in the Bible? Man, just literally just read the Bible. I think that if we would go back and read the Bible with open eyes or open hearts, open minds, you'll see that a lot of stuff that we believe about the afterlife, the Bible just doesn't teach us. It doesn't teach it. And even if you're not like a Revelation guru, you know what I'm saying? You don't really understand Revelation. It's got it's a lot filled with a lot of imagery and analogies and callbacks to, you know, Daniel and Isaiah and stuff like that. It can be a very daunting and threatening book to read for sure. But just a sort of cursory read of the Gospels, especially if you start where, you know, at the cross and then read on to the end of the Gospel where, you know, he rises from the dead and what that implies for Christians. Read what the you know, what Jesus says about Lazarus when she says, you know, if you weren't, you know, when Lazarus' sister says to Jesus, man, if you were here, he wouldn't have died. And Jesus replies, I am the resurrection. I am the resurrection. And him saying I am the resurrection has implications for Lazarus. immediately. And then it's a foreshadowing of what that means for us as well. Any thoughts on the rapture? I can't talk about that because I already did. I talked about the rapture for like 15 minutes already in this live. Yeah, it answers a lot of questions, and I'm definitely giving y'all way more stuff to think about as well. Thessalonians says that we who are alive and remain will not precede those who are asleep. Yeah, we read Thessalonians earlier. Any book recommendations to help me read the Bible without my Western worldviews and to read it in its context? I don't know. I mean, it sounds lazy. It's kind of the Bible, I guess you can say. Like, read a lot of different books, but keep going back to the Bible. Keep going back to the Bible. Because this is one of those topics where, like I said, I do feel like even if you don't get all the answers, or it may seem like, you need some more theological commentary on the scriptures, I feel like this is just one of those things, and I think rightfully so, that the scriptures have just made very plain that you just read it and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to have resurrected bodies. And that's believed in many different passages in the New Testament. Alex, I don't know what you're, you seem like you're on a rant about something. I'm not sure what it's about. A bit off topic. When are you going to do your talk about the LGBTQ community? I just did a podcast on it. Y'all should go listen to my podcast. Best translation to read of the Bible? There's a few. I know some people think KJV is the one that dropped down from heaven like the tablets. But I kind of bounce around. CSB, ESV, NIV, NASB. I kind of bounce around. I'm not going to change topics. We talked about a lot in here, so I'm not going to switch to child trafficking and Wayfair and LGBTQ and all that. Like, I'm not saying they're not important topics, but I'm not going to get drawn into a bunch of other conversations. I heard NASB is the most accurate. Everybody will say some is the most accurate. So. I'm assuming a lot of people didn't come in the beginning because the questions start turning to a lot of other things besides resurrection. I hope these are new people, because it would be a little discouraging to talk about something as important as resurrection and afterlife, and then we'd be like, let's talk about something more interesting. And I'm like, this is what we need to get. I don't mean to sound bullheaded, but it's like we've got to think about this. This is, it's really big. So, okay, if y'all came in late, you're forgiven. But for those of y'all who are trying to change subjects and you've been here for the last 30 to 45 minutes, fam. How do we open up this topic in a sensitive manner? Because let's face it, it will literally be a cause for much argument. I think the first part is not so much. I know some people may think, the most controversial thing is talking about rapture or whatever it may be. And because literally so much of the Western church believes in the sort of dispensational rapture, and yeah, like it's not so much starting with that. I think the more important thing is seeing the scriptures where it's like, oh no, like we are looking for a new heaven and a new earth. I think that in and of itself is a huge, because when we see it in scripture, as a lot of y'all will see, y'all be like, oh yeah, I do believe that. Like it's like when you see it, it's like, oh, that's not really like a controversial. It shouldn't be a controversial thing. It's like, oh yeah, like I do believe in a physical resurrection. But so why has that not infiltrated and permeated my thoughts about afterlife? Like, why don't I think about that more? Like, why does that not crash in on my worldview more? It's resurrection for a lot of Christians. It's not something that they necessarily would automatically disagree with. It's something that's sort of on the, on the peripherals, kind of on the edge, the outer edges of their thoughts. So. When Jesus was resurrected, it said that graves were open and people began to walk around towns. This was literal, right? Yeah, literal. Again, I don't know what to make of that after that. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know where they went. My assumption is that they had a resurrected body like Lazarus, because Lazarus still ain't walking around the earth now, so Lazarus died again. As we could, I think logically conclude, but other than that, I don't know. Yeah. Where do you believe Christians that have died and will be before resurrection are? I think, again, that's wrapped up in what Paul says about, he says, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And I think that's where most of our theology stops often. Our afterlife theology stops. We think that that's it. So, and I think there's an intermediate sort of space. Like, yeah, to be absent from the body is to in fact be present with the Lord. But there will be a time where bodies will be resurrected. So yeah. I'm gonna have to mute you, Alex, because you keep like typing multiple things. Are you doing that on purpose? Like multiplying things? It's coming off as like spam. So yeah. I just think that oftentimes we stop there. We stop at, that's it. There's no resurrection. It's just like, yeah. How does the fact of resurrection affect the way you personally live your life, earthly? Yeah, I think it affects my life in the sense of like how I see my body, how I see tattoos. I thought about that too. Like, I don't even think that tattoos are inherently sinful, but I'm just like, okay, my resurrected body, is it going to take away the tattoos or, because I kind of don't like some of them. So I hope that in the new life that the mugs is kind of etched away. I don't know. It makes me think in that sense. It makes me think about, how I care about people now, how I see the world as far as my care for it. Like there is even for the earth, like that even affects the way that we see earth, that there's a green theology. Someone says, I'm happier being a non-theologian. No, you're not. Everyone's a theologian. Theology is simply saying it's what you believe about God. It's studying what you believe about God. That's it. And everyone has some belief about God. Everyone is making beliefs about God, is studying what they believe about God. You're here on this channel right now because you want to learn something about God, right? You want to think about things about God. Even if you're not taking my word for it, it's still, you're in the conversation of like, well, what do I think about God? That's theology. So you can't escape it. You are by default a theologian. But yeah, green theology, in the sense of like, what do I believe about trees and animals and my partnership with the earth to give God glory? If God does not despise the natural, then what do I believe about animals and about the earth and about taking care of it and about pollution? Like these have, these have real implications. So I mean, theology as educational discipline. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just trying to like take away all the like pomp and circumstance of the word theology. Yeah, I'm not saying you should be, going to seminary and stuff like that, but like it is educational discipline. It's educational and spiritual discipline. Like, yeah, we're doing theology. Like everyone, all I'm saying is everyone's doing theology, fam. So let's see. What would cause a Christian to miss the rapture? I don't believe in the rapture. So there's that part. Will we experience the tribulation period? I don't know what this makes me post-trib. I don't know this stuff, but I believe that the tribulation has already started. That's kind of what I've always believed, but I'm willing to deconstruct that too. So, yeah. I already talked about 1 Thessalonians and 4:17. If I'll leave this up so you can go back and watch it, but yeah, I'm aware of 1 Thessalonians 4. I've already discussed my thoughts on it, so y'all just have to kind of go back because I spent a good bit of time on it. I don't want to like rewind on it. We've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes. The rapture is not important in the grand scheme of things. We should focus on more important issues. It depends on what you mean by that. I'd probably disagree, though. What we believe about the afterlife matters a ton. Wish I could talk to Joseph. Can y'all stop calling me Joso? It's kind of weird. I do not want that to stick in anyone's mind. Just Joe or Joseph would be great, or Joseph Solomon. That'd be great. I think this is something that progressive Christianity does for sure. Maybe that's another conversation somebody's having. The discussion led by John Piper with 3 other theologians is a great resource to see the 3 different views on eschatology. What stuck out to me is not what they disagreed on, but what they agreed on. Yeah, and that's kind of been my biggest thing. One of the reasons why I've been in the conversations about the major views of eschatology from a sort of reform perspective, but like, you're right. I know pastors who were like post-trib for like 10 years and they switched over and then they switched again. And it's just like, okay, yeah, I feel we want to be extremely, extremely right. And that's fine. I am trying to focus on more the general idea of Christianity, what our general faith means. And that generally, I think resurrection, that we will have a real resurrection, is a very broad, very general, important, fundamental, I would even call it fundamental to the Christian faith. It's fundamental. And that's my opinion, I guess. But I don't think I think it's just so woven into the scriptures. It's not a peripheral topic that I'm just like, I think we got to get that part right. And then, we can have debates on the other parts. Let's see. Let's see. Some Christians told me that we should ask for forgiveness every night to sort of wipe your sins away. I always thought this was disingenuous. What do you think? As far as in terms of like resurrection and afterlife and stuff, like I'm under the persuasion that we were saved once and for all, that Christ's work on the cross was indeed sufficient to save us. And there's also an aspect of like, working out your salvation with fear and trembling. Christians should go through life always in a space of repentance, of repenting, but not repenting in a like, let me get saved again vibe, if that makes sense. Like, let me make sure, because if I forget to ask for forgiveness, I'm gonna go to hell. I gotta ask for forgiveness every single night. And if I fall asleep without asking for it, and I die in my sleep, then I'm not going to heaven. And it's like, that's not Jesus. So, what made you want to talk about this? It's just something kind of been on my mind. It's been on my mind a lot, actually. And it's just like, it's always like, it's probably one of the things I think about most, actually. And that's not even like a flex. As I think about it, I'm like, I actually think I do think about that quite a bit as a background thought, though. And I think that's for a lot of Christians, we think about resurrection, maybe not even as a background thought. Sometimes we just kind of, it's like we talk about it every now and then on a special live on a Saturday night, but we don't actually talk about it, or think about it deeply. But one of my favorite theologians is N.T. Wright. And all he talks about is resurrection. And I think it's good. I think it's a really good way to approach theology. I remember I was in seminary. One of my professors had said, you always got to work your way back to Jesus, and that'll take care of everything else. What do you believe about Jesus? And that will tell you what you believe about a lot of other things. And I know that sounds like a very broad question, but if you start thinking about it more and more, it's like, yeah, it does make a lot of sense. Even in the conversation of, before I go there. Yeah. So what you believe about the cross and the resurrection has huge implications for what you believe about family and, injustice and, how you treat people, how you're going to eat, how you're going to take care of your body. Like, is this am I walking in a way that is looking forward as if I'm preparing for a real resurrected life? Not that I'm saying that, all of our hope is in this life or all our hope is in the physical, but it's like, am I moving in such a way that shows my anticipation of like what things could be and what I believe things could or should be like in the resurrection. So that's so what you believe about Jesus has huge implications, and maybe I'll talk about that on the podcast at some other point. So I had a recent podcast. You should go check it out. It's called Queerness, a conversation on queerness and God, with a friend of mine by the name of Will Lofton, and he's a queer black man attracted to men. And we had a conversation about it. Some people were a little up in arms about it because they felt like I didn't really like stick it to them, or I was confusing or whatever it may be. And people have their opinions. It really was just a conversation. It was a very sort of like introductory conversation, and it was literally only an hour. And I think people always think that we should, somehow get to sin in the gospel like explicitly in an hour. And I'm like, I hope that's not how you approach your regular life. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I don't feel the pressure to like, I got to make sure. In some cases I do. I feel like when the Lord is leading me, like, man, this is the time to share the gospel. Do it. And then there's other times where it's like, I'm gonna share the gospel, but I'm also knowing that this is going to be a several hour, several week, several month, several year conversation I'm gonna have with this person. So I'll just weave the gospel in. And so, even on I'm gonna do a video about that too. I think the conversation about homosexuality and same-sex attraction, and whether or not someone can be actively homosexual, transgender, whatever it may be, and be a Christian. It's not so much what you believe that you're allowed to do. It's the question is, who do you believe Jesus is? And what do you believe Jesus believes about himself? And then the third question would be, what do you believe Jesus believes about the Bible? And those are three really big questions that will sort of cut out the bones. It will take out, whatever it may be. It'll cut out all the fat. The question is, what do you believe about Jesus? Or should I say, who do you believe Jesus is? Second question is, who do you believe Jesus believed he is or was, depending on your worldview? And what do you believe Jesus believes about the Bible? And, you'll get your answer that you really need to settle on, because I think sometimes we're having these conversations with people trying to make them believe or act in a certain way. And it's like, well, there's a reason why y'all are bumping heads as far as, what is morally right or morally wrong. And the surface conversation is same-sex attraction, homosexuality. That's the surface conversation. And we're staying up here on the surface. And I don't mind having that surface conversation. I had that surface conversation with someone on a podcast. But the real issue underneath that, though, is not, what do you believe about homosexuality? The question is, what do you believe? Who do you believe Jesus is? And who do you think Jesus believed he is or was? And what do you believe Jesus believes about the Bible? And that's where you really have your real conversations. More, you can work with the sort of presuppositions, the assumptions that work on the surface. So Yeah, surface conversations are great though. I'm not saying not have surface conversations. Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm down for it. We often have those surface conversations. And I'm not saying the first thing you need to do is when you know, bump into somebody who has different worldviews than you is to be like, first thing is, who do you believe Jesus is? And what did he believe about himself? And what did he believe about the Bible? That could come off, depending on the person, depending on the situation, can come off very aggressive. But at some point, you got to get around to that topic, and that'll solve. And technically, I did ask that on the podcast with Will. I said, "Do you believe the Bible?" But even that is not getting to the issue, because again, it's not necessarily what you believe about the Bible. It's wrapped up in sort of one, but it's a twofold question. It's not so much. It's not just what do you believe about the Bible. It's what do you believe Jesus believes about the Bible? Because, you know, when I asked him, I was like, do you believe, and we had the conversation right in this room, actually. If those of y'all want to get a picture of what the conversation looked like, he was sitting right on that couch right there. And I was sitting over here looking at him like this, having this conversation. So here's the visual for the podcast. And I asked him, I said, do you believe the Bible prescribes a norm for sexuality? He says, I do. I believe. And I believe that he basically, and he said this outside of that conversation to me before too. Like, yeah, I know the Bible doesn't agree with me in that part. So, and that's conversations we've had to have. So, you know. Yeah, check out the podcast. It'll be good. We'll probably do a second part. The first one really, and maybe even the second one. I don't know. I didn't plan the conversation out. I just wanted to have a conversation, and I wanted to be winsome with it and wanted to be challenging to him. And, you know, for the most part, it was overwhelmingly positive response about the podcast. Some people thought that I wasn't ready, or I seemed like I was squirmish or something like that. I don't know. But it was like, just having a conversation and pushing back. Like, I think what will help a lot of people in their witness is questions. Ask a ton of questions. Be ready to give an answer too when the question turns back on you. But ask a ton of questions. You'll know you'll be able to sort of pinpoint more who you're talking to. Amen. That's Sky Club talk. Amen. Seriously though, I'm about to get off here in a second because I can't be on here longer than I'm normally on with Patreon folks. I got to keep this short. I've been here for an hour and a half. But check out we have these conversations or conversations like this all the time on Patreon. Patreon.com/whatisjoedoing. All the Sky Club folks are in here deep. And it's been really dope. It's been a really, we had a really great conversation on Thursday with Genetics, the poet. And I didn't know I was going to go there. We were talking about, it was really dope. We actually had a conversation, not just about sex, waiting for sex until marriage, which is a conversation people have in the church all the time. But we got into the conversation about, well, what about when you've waited for sex until marriage and that first honeymoon night is not all that you expected it to be? And we go into that and like, is there a waiting after marriage as well? And it was a great conversation. I'm not going to tell you all the details of it. You got to go to Patreon to listen to it. It's up. But brought her on for a really dope convo. Put up extra podcast on there and just engage quite a bit. I spend quite a few hours in one capacity or another with Patreon throughout the week. So check that mug out for sure, for sure. Patreon.com. I'll put it in the joint. It's been really helpful. My goal is that once I get enough people on Patreon, I'm just gonna quit social media altogether. So y'all better get in while the getting's good. I do not want to be on social media. That sounds so bad. I hate Instagram. I hate Twitter. I hate it all. So I know. I do this stuff. It's the reason why I even did this live right now, because I know I can spend so much time on Patreon, but I know this is how people have found me. And the last live I did on YouTube actually went surprisingly well. I didn't know it was going to have that many views. So I thought I'd do it again. I might do this a little bit more often, because from that last hangout, a lot of people came on to the Patreon from there. So I was like, okay, cool. This might be a space to continue to do this. So you're right. Joe wants to be a regular Joe. I ain't going to even lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. Being popular has its benefits. It definitely has its benefits. And is, having a following has been dope in a lot of ways. I don't regret it. I just also know I'm still evolving in and how I navigate that space and how much I want to be in it. So, and even now, especially in pandemic, it's like, what does it mean to be a popular Christian? A bunch of people come to your shows? Because they don't. Ain't no shows. So what does it even mean these days? Like, it means you got a lot of followers on Instagram, and then, but so it's really proven for Patreon to be more valuable, because it's like, it kind of becomes more real. It's like, so what does it mean to be popular if you're only digitally, like, surface level popular, with people? Not to say this is surface level. People have grown a lot from these spaces, from me putting out videos, but like, if I'm not able to move in another more real space alongside of the surface level space, then it's like, well, what is it? What is it? So that's why I love Patreon. Low key, I might even save this video for Patreon. I might not even put it on YouTube, and I'll just put the short version. I'm gonna make a short video for YouTube. That's what I'll do. I'll do a short video about resurrection on YouTube. I'll put the long version on Patreon. That's what I'll do. Maybe. Ooh, y'all aggressive. That made me not want to answer your question. Answer my question. Whew. See, y'all see why I don't like... Y'all just be talking to folks. This is exactly what I be talking about. Woo-wee. Yeah, buddy. People talk to me crazy on Patreon too, but at least I know them better. I can talk crazy back to them. It's different on the live though. Hey man, life ain't fair sometimes. Life ain't fair. I know. Put it on here. I'm gonna put it on you. I'm gonna put it on Patreon. That'll be y'all incentive to jump on Patreon. I'm gonna put this joint on Patreon. Yeah. This feels like a breakup. It's not a breakup. I'll be back on YouTube, but I think what I'll do is I'll keep doing these YouTube lives. And then if you're not here for the live, then you've got to be able to be on Patreon and watch it again. I think that'll be good. The minimum entry on Patreon is it's $5. So there's that, which I don't think is unfair. Anytime I do something for free, I've done it for free. It is what it is. I got on live and, y'all don't have to pay me for that. There's just me engaging. But then after that, I can do with the content. Where did we get the idea that life is supposed to be fair anyway? From the Blue Ribbon Club, everybody getting a ribbon. Now we deserve everything. Yeah, so. Yeah, y'all been spoiled on Patreon for real this week. Like, super, super. All right, so I'll give y'all 10 more minutes of question and answer, and then I'm going to end it. And then I'll put it on the patreon.com. Somebody said, answer my question like Mortal Kombat. Right, it's aggressive. Answer my question. Ooh-wee. When am I live on Patreon? I am live on Patreon every Monday at 6 p.m. and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Every week. I take some breaks every now and then. But for the most part, every Monday at 6, because it's good for people who live in North America, and then 1 p.m. on Thursdays to fit people who live internationally. So, yep. Why did I bleach my hair? Because wasn't nothing deep about it. What are your thoughts on the book of Genesis and Evolution? That is too long of a question for the 10 minutes that I have. It's so much, but we talk about it quite a bit. How's your debt situation? Are you in a better place regarding that? I've been debt free for 2 years now, over 2 years. Minus my house, obviously. Now, I guess technically I'm not debt free anymore because I'm a whole house in debt. But it's not a bad debt to me. I'm proud to be in debt with a house that I can afford. But other than that, debt free, homie. The most important untalked about thing in Christianity. Yep. We just talked about it. And it'll be on Patreon later. Did you discuss courting, dating during COVID? I actually have a podcast episode called We Find Love, and it kind of talks about dating and courting during a pandemic. Not the whole episode, but there is a good little bit of it discussing that. What is the thing? It is the resurrection. That's the most important untalked about thing in Christianity. And its implications. It's not the most talked about. You savage hippie, you're a little late. So yes, we talk about Jesus resurrecting all the time, but we don't talk about it in the way that we talked about it today without having to do the whole conversation all over again. But trust me, we don't talk about it. We definitely don't be talking about it. Did you see Dana Coverstone prophetic video? I don't watch prophetic videos. Would you say you regard yourself as a minimalist? I used to. I was trying to, but I just call myself a gospelist and try not to hoard a bunch of stuff. So in some respect, I am a aspiring minimalist, I guess you can say. But the big thing is like, stop hoarding stuff, yo. How was your experience how was your Christian experience in the African countries you visited? It's crazy. Africans really love God. They're in, as far as expression and passion, desire, it's different. It's definitely different than the States. And I don't mean to say that as a bashing to the States to somehow be like, man, American Christianity, people are always on that wagon, which is a lot to say about American Christianity. A lot. I have a lot to critique about American Christianity, but not to jump on the bandwagon. It really is just African Christianity is different. It's different, but it comes with a lot of problems, just like American Christianity comes with too. That's just how we move. But yeah. But yeah, it just came here on a whim of fate. Yeah, man, I'm glad, or girl, woman, man, I'm not sure. I don't see a profile picture, so I don't want to assume what you are. But yeah, I'm glad you showed up, Savage Hippie. It's an interesting name. Have you heard of testimonies of people recently moving in the power of like raising the dead? Yeah, ironically, that video from Johannesburg, South Africa. Oh, it's the worst. I think that dude actually died too. Like somebody said he died like a couple days later, a couple weeks later. There was a guy who like, the guy who was supposedly resurrected. Oh my gosh, this dude. Maybe we'll watch that together in on Sky Club, y'all. Oh my gosh. I like giving commentary on videos. And this dude is supposed to rise from the dead. Oh, y'all really believe he died? Oh yeah, he died. So he actually did die afterwards. Okay. Yeah, man. It was like they said he was supposed to, he supposedly had died and he rose from the dead, and like he woke up shaking and looking around, and they gave him some food and woo, it was weird. Yeah, it was weird, but apparently he did die shortly after that. That's crazy. That's crazy. Doubt it. Joe is his own brand, honestly. What was the question? What do you say about those who say they visited heaven and hell? That's fine. I just think it's funny. And that's what black folks say when it's not actually nothing funny. It's not actually funny. They just say that to say something. I just think it's funny that, John went to heaven in Revelation and he was blown away and started, a lot of stuff he didn't even want to give specific descriptions about. And Paul didn't want to talk about it, but we got people who made whole books. I just think it's funny. That's all I'm going to say about that. The question was, would you join Maverick City? Somebody said something about their writing camp. Maverick City has reached out to me several times. We've talked quite a bit, actually. The sort of founder, writer guy, one of the writers for Maverick City, has reached out to me on several occasions. We've been DMing and just nothing ever happened. So I don't know. They're in Atlanta too. They're right around the corner. I think the guy's name is Tony. Yeah, he hit me up back in May, actually. That was the last time. He was like, dude, let's write. And I said, been waiting, dog. I've been waiting. So y'all couldn't even see that was Maverick City, but it was Maverick City. We got 2 minutes. Let's see. How are you with the pandemic and social distancing and all? Also, false prophets are caking it here in SA. Why are you even up if you are in SA? It is mad late in South Africa right now. What is it, like 2 o'clock in the morning? 2, 3 o'clock in the morning right now? I'm doing all right though, man. Or woman, ma'am, sir. I can't see I think it's a woman. I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. It's Saturday, bro. Still, I just don't like stand up. I've never been that person. I don't know. In college, I went to bed. My senior year, I went to bed by 9:30 every night. Joe for president? Absolutely not. I'd be a terrible president, and so would Kanye. And I think I'll end on that. I love y'all. I love y'all. If you want to see this whole video, we were talking about resurrection and afterlife. It will be on patreon.com/whatisjoedoing. It's in the description of this video and the description of other videos I put out recently. Would love to see y'all there. May God's grace and his peace be with you. Oh, hold on. Yeah, I gotta make sure this mug saves though. Enable DVR. In stream.